Well, today's episode is going to be a lot of fun. Our first thing we're going to review is Ganbare Pro Wrestling with Ghost Hunters. We have some interesting matches that will take place before their big event at Ota Ward Gymnasium for Wrestle Sekigahara 2. And of course, we move on to Impact Wrestling, do a tour in Australia down under, where they're in Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, where we're going to see a couple of championship matches, non-title matches, the whole enchilada on that particular show. And then of course we move on to AEW Rampage. We have some interesting matches taking place. Hikaru Shida takes on Tail Valkyrie. The ROH World title will be undefended, and plenty more other matches. And then of course we level up. Who's going to level up on this latest episode of NXT Level Up? And of course we got a couple of news updates to tell what's been going on in the world of pro wrestling, such as what promotions are throwing out what events, who's booked, what matches are being set, injuries, debuts, the whole enchilada of pro wrestling. So, let's get ready for another episode of the Deleted Wrestle Zone.
Are you ready? Get up, get up! 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 Get up, get up!
Welcome everybody to the Deleted Wrestle Zone, all things that is pro wrestling with AEW, NXT, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Impact Wrestling, the National Wrestling Alliance, various promotions, wrestlers, matches, and championships. I am your host, Jared here. So welcome to the Deleted Wrestle Zone. So if you guys this is your first time, please subscribe and click like on this episode. If you guys enjoy it, then you guys are in for a good ride. So today we're going to be reviewing right now. Our first one is, of course, Ganbare Pro. Now, this is one of their latest shows, smaller venues shows that they normally do. I forgot the name of the venue. This is called Ghost Hunters 2023. This is a most of an outpost before going to Ota Ward Gymnasium next week. Now, our opening match, we have Manetatsu Nakamura taking on Miyuki Watase, who is our current Ganbare, the Spirit of Ganbare openweight champion. This match, of course, is more of a preview for him before he gets to the main event. He is going to face against Izami Kodama for the title. But, however, he was able to succeed this match by applying an arm assistant front neck work. I thought it was interesting, so he picked up a good win. Now, our next match, this is a Joshi match. This is what is called Assessment of an Assessment. Now, if you guys remember clearly back in one of Ganjo, or should I say Ganbare Yoshi, Yuna Manaze, the general manager of Ganbare Yoshi, has announced that Riro will have a match at Wrestle Sekigahara. Her opponent will be none other than, of course, the resident eel, Unagi Sayaka, who is one of Yuna Manaze's students. However, Unagi decided, to see how she is, so she called in a favor to a very unlikely person, and that is Aruka Omasaki. Now, if you guys aren't familiarized about this, let me explain a little bit of background between those two. Both Unagi and Mina were in a tag match. They had like a bit of a feud with, of course, Umasaki, who is from World Woman Pros like Diana. At the time, she was tag team champions with Miyuki Takase. They had two matches in the same day from two different promotions. Of course, Mina had problems with her in the past, and of course, there was that one moment where Umasaki teamed up with both Pink Kabuki, rest in peace. They're actually for a match against Oedo Tai, which was successful. So Unagi called her for a favor to do this assessment. And of course, Omasaki's not really fond of the idea, but she did it anyway. But it was a pretty good match to give Rira a bit of let's see what she can do for herself, because Umasaki, she is a rising star, and it was the cutie, what was it called? The cutie special that finished her off. So it was a pretty good match. But however, I know that Umasaki will pay attention between the match between Rira and Unagi on July 9th. Now, our next match, we have Kaho Matsushita from Ice Ribbon, teaming up with Yoshiko Hasegawa, taking on Rukaze and Yuri. I thought this match was a lot more fun because, as you know, Yuri is becoming now rising on her own terms since leaving Just Tap Out. But this match was pretty good. She pulled off a swanton bomb onto Matsushita and ended in that fashion. I thought it was pretty great. Our next match, we have tag team action. We got Shota and Kisuke Ishii taking on, of course, who was it? Yuma Arashi and Ken Oka, who actually they're old friends or so. But the match was pretty good. I thought it was great. There was the X Factor is Arashi, who is a much bigger individual to take out. So, however, that did not help because he applied a diving senton onto, who was it? Shota? No, on Ishii to pick up the win. Now, our next match, we have a trios elimination match. We have team number 1, Yumehiro Inamari, Tyson Mayoguchi, and Soma Takawa taking on Yuki Kanzaki, Minoru Fujita, and Tsuchiro Katsumari, or whatever. Hopefully I pronounced it right. This is how the elimination goes. Katsumura eliminates Mayoguchi in a ring out. Basically, he tossed him off the ring. And then, of course, it was a double ring out by Takawa and Kanzaki. So they eliminated each other. So that's very rich right there. And then, of course, we have Unamari eliminates Fujita in a ring out. And then finally, it was Katsumura who picked up the win by doing a ring out as well onto Imamari. So that ends it in that way. So I thought it was a pretty good, solid show. But we'll see how it goes when the big show happens next week. So I think that's it for Ganbare Pro. Let's move on with Impact Wrestling. All right, Impact Wrestling. As you know, they went to do a very interesting tour in Australia, and they ended up going to Wagga Wagga, New South Wales. I don't know where that place is, but seems interesting. This is called the Down Under Tour, and this is just day 1 right now. We're doing, I don't know how many days we're going to be doing it, but let's get started on that. Our first match, we have talent coming from Australia, Slex and Adam Brooks. Now, I am familiarized with these two wrestlers. I have seen certain material from promotions down in Australia. Slex, he's very interesting, and Adam Brooks, yes. I mean, this is a good way for, of course, us American fans, especially if you guys are unfamiliarized with these guys, to take a look at. I think Slex and Adam Brooks are two of the most impressive wrestlers I've ever watched coming from Australia. But it was, of course, Slex with the Slexecution. It's more like a spinning roundhouse, flying roundhouse kick, or kind of like an Insiguri type that took out Adam Brooks, and Slex picked up the win. Now, our next match, we have Giselle Shaw versus Erica Reed. Now, keep in mind, the following day, Giselle Shaw will be facing Deonna Purrazzo for the Impact Knockouts World Championship. As you know, Giselle Shaw has been on a verge of trying to prove a point. She has been dealing with wrestlers who she felt that the spotlight should have been on her rather than people like Trinity and Deonna. But however, this is more of a warm-up. I have to say she was very impressive. But however, the one thing we can agree upon, and I have to say Tom and of course Renrell agreed with Tom, that we have known Giselle Shaw was never good at submissions, but somehow she was able to apply like a somewhat modified version of a Fujiwara armbar to pick up the win. And that was a direct message to Deonna Purrazzo. Remember, Deonna Purrazzo is a technical wrestler. She knows how to submit people, and I think that's a great message for her to receive. But let's see what happens until that day happens. Next up, we have the the Impact Wrestling Digital Media title, Eddie Edwards versus Joe Hendry. Now, Joe Hendry, you know, he has a tendency to make videos of music for against opponents. I mean, recently he had the stripper Kenny that he did, and I thought that was so hilarious. But he did not have that today with Eddie Edwards. But however, he did say that Eddie sucks. Yeah, that's all he said. Eddie sucks. Plain and simple, you know. I'm surprised that he just went that way, because he always likes to do things big and bombastic in order to get under the skin of his opponents, but it didn't work. But however, Eddie Edwards, as you know, he's not going to take any crap from Joe Hendry. That means he'll pull up every stop possible to get to Joe Hendry and make him pay for his little discretion. But of course, Eddie Edwards was almost on the verge of trying to win the match until Joe Hendry was able to apply the standing ovation to pick up the win and retain the title. So that's a pretty good one. Now, next up, we have Killer Kelly taking on Aisha, who I mentioned a few times. If you guys remember Aisha, I talked about her when, of course, NWA were doing their The World is a Vampire tour in Australia. I was surprised to find out she was going to be involved, but I have to say this is a good way for her to keep exposing more of herself with some of the much well-known promotions that we know of. And I thought it was very interesting. But however, in this case, as you know, Killer Kelly, she is completely different than any other wrestler we have watched. She applied the Killer Clutch, forcing Aisha to tap out, and boom, adios. Now, our next match, we have a triple threat match for the Impact X Division champion. We have Robbie, oi, oi, oi. That's right. The Sniper of the Skies, Robbie Eagles, taking on a former 5-time X Division champion, Frank Kazarian, and of course, our current champion, 9-time X Division champion, Chris Sabin. Now, you know this is going to be one hell of a crazy match. Now, keep in mind, Chris Sabin doesn't need to be pinned in this match, but he knows that too well, knowing that, of course, as a veteran, he would know that he is not liable to lose the match if he's not pinned or submitted. But he kept that under his toes. But of course, it was the cradle shock onto Eagles that put him away for Sabin to retain the title. So I thought that's pretty much it right there. Now, this is much of a preview for a match that will take place at Slammiversary. We have Brian Myers and Moose taking on the ABC, the Bullet Club, Ace Austin and Chris Bay. This is where, of course, we see how they're put themselves to the test. ABC has been very effective as a tag team since they formed. So you ask yourself, will they be able to survive against someone like Moose and Myers? Of course they would, but of course we're going to see Myers and Moose try to cut corners. But luckily it did not work. It was, of course, Chris Bay was able to roll up Brian Myers to pick up the win, and it was just done like that. And Brian Myers cannot believe he did this made. But the real question is, will they be able to dethrone the ABC at Slammiversary, which, of course, the tag titles will be defended in a 4-way. Now, our next match, we have, of course, the Virtuosa, Deonna Purrazzo, taking on, of course, a local, and you guys know who she is, and that is Steph the Landers. So this was also another match that would put Deonna Purrazzo to the test. Now, keep in mind, Deonna Purrazzo is a much more bigger individual than Deonna Purrazzo, but I'm sure Purrazzo would definitely try to find some ways to overcome it. Now, she tried to put the armbar, the Fujiwara armbar, many times, and of course tried the Queen's Gambit, and did not work. But luckily, in the end, she was able to apply the Fujiwara armbar to pick up the win. But of course, this also is a direct message to Giselle Shaw. She probably will be paying attention, and she will see what happens until then. Now, our main event, this is a rematch from Against All Odds. We have the Impact World title, Alex Shelley taking on Steve Maclin, who is the former Impact World Champion. Now, you probably think Maclin will try to learn from his mistakes to what happened. Now, keep in mind, Maclin had been desired to become champion, but he lost it real quick since then. But now, Alex Shelley, who has worked his butt off for almost 20 years, has finally become the champion, and now he has to prove that he earned to be in this at this top of the spot, and of course to be the face of the company. And of course he did that until he applied Shell Shock. Right there, it's over. He's done, and he retained the title. So I thought it was pretty good. Now, however, after this particular show, we do have another one, day 2. I'm not sure if they're still in Wagga Wagga, but we'll see what happens until then. So right now, let's move on to our next review, AEW Rampage. Okay, AEW Rampage opened up with the ROH World title on the line. We have, of course, Claudio defending it against the high-flying sensation Commander. Now, this was a very interesting match because of the dynamics from two different opponents. You know, Commander, he's very spectacular when it comes to, doing things in the air and running on the ropes, that sort of thing. But he was very impressive to try to take on someone, Claudio, who is a bit of a much of aggressive wrestler, much stronger and capable that he could knock you out no matter what. So he tried many ways to ensure that doesn't happen. But unfortunately, on a moment where he was in the middle of the air, he was actually gave him the uppercut, and just like that, the referee just said it was done, just like that, giving him the win. I hope he's okay, but it was a pretty interesting match to watch. Now, our next match, we have the Blade taking on the Perfect 10, Shawn Spears. It's been a while since we've seen Shawn Spears. I just didn't expect him to go back to the Perfect 10. I mean, he did transition from becoming earlier in the career, in his AEW career, as the chairman, and now he's the 10. I think we all miss him as the 10 when he was known as Ty Dillinger back in the day. But nonetheless, it was a pretty good, interesting comeback for him. I mean, I know he took some time off to be with his wife, who, of course, recently given birth to a son. But it's great to see him. He seems like he's in good shape. But the obvious question we all ask ourselves, how much ring rust does he have? Well, I say that he's pretty good of what he's doing now. But he was able to apply, what was it? The C4 onto the Blade to give him a good win. I hope we get to see him more than we expect. Now, our next match, we have tag team action. We got Johnny TV and QT Marshall, along with that so-called, who can't sing for crap, who we call her Jillian Hall 2.0, Harley Cameron, taking on Isaiah Cassidy and Matt Hardy, and being accompanied with them is Ethan Page. Now, this type of match, how is it going to be? Of course, but it was, of course, Johnny TV that picked up the win on Isaiah Cassidy, and then they decided to attack Hardy, but Ethan Page decided to protect Matt Hardy no matter what. But however, it was just too much, the numbers game, and here comes the Acclaim, who has some unfinished business with QT and Johnny after what happened last week. If you guys remember, they just were viciously attacked after they won their trios match. Now, our main event is, of course, I think this is the first time ever these two have ever met. We have Taya Valkyrie taking on Hikaru Shida. This is a very interesting match. However, as you know, Taya Valkyrie has been frustrated with things have been going recently with her. Now, keep in mind, since arriving to AEW, she had one goal in mind, and that is the TBS title. She was unable to succeed to obtain it twice. The first time was because she got screwed by Smart Mark Sterling. The second time, she was unable to do so until, of course, the return of Chris Statlander put Jade Cargill away and becoming the new TBS champion. And of course, she did challenge her for the belt, unsuccessful. But now she's facing against a former AEW Women's Champion, and that is, of course, Hikaru Shida. However, Shida seems like there was a moment where she was injured, but she was hanging on as much as possible. However, she was able to counter the Road to Valhalla into a roll-up, and this was not like an upset, but more of a surprise that she was able to counter Taya Valkyrie main weapon, the Road to Valhalla, giving her the win. So the obvious thing now tells us what's going to happen now with Taya Valkyrie, with this frustration of her losing streak that she has with bigger matches, but we'll see what happens until then. So let's just move on to our final review, and that is NXT Level Up. Okay, So who levels up on this latest episode of NXT Level Up? Let's find out. We only are going to be we were showcased by 2 matches in this particular. Normally we see 3, but on rare occasions we'll see 2, and that's the case. However, our first match, we have Blair Davenport taking on Kelani Jordan. Now keep in mind, Blair Davenport is now back, sending a direct message to all the women in the locker room. Kelani Jordan had become the latest victim of Blair Davenport since her return. However, Blair Davenport is becoming more dangerous and dangerous. It's only a matter of time until she gets the one belt she desires, and that is the NXT Women's title. So that would be something that we definitely will see in the future. But she was able to defeat Kelani Jordan by applying one of her main weapons, and that is, of course, the Falcon Arrow. So we will be paying attention what Blair Davenport will be doing in NXT in the future. Now, our next match, but first there was an interview with Miles Bourne. As you know, he's facing against a much stronger and much dangerous opponent, and that is, of course, Joe Coffey. Now, of course, the obvious question does tell is, we saw what happened on NXT with Joe Coffey. He paid a visit to the Don, explaining him what happened. As you know, we all thought that Gallows had something to do with Tony D'Angelo being in jail. It turns out it was Stacks. So the obvious does tell is where it's going to happen from here. But, however, Joe Coffey has Miles Bourne to attend to. It was a pretty good match from what I can tell. It was very interesting. But it was, of course, the Belfast by Joe Coffey to pick up the win. As you know, the Gallows Boys will be making to the top. It's only a matter of time until Joe Coffey grabs a goal for himself. And I think that's pretty much it, what we have for NXT Level Up. I believe it's time to our last and final thing, which is news updates. Okay, welcome to our news updates. So, we only have at least a few that we're going to talk about. So let's talk about it. In the last episode of my news updates report, New Japan Pro Wrestling has announced the new generation of the Three Musketeers. That is, of course, the Shooter or Roughneck, Shota Umino, the Son of Strong Style, Ren Narita, and now Yota Tsuji. Now, as you probably know, these 3 men were in the same class together before they went to their respective excursions. Umino went to Rev Pro. Of course, he came back. Ren Narita ended up going to LA with Shibata. As for Tsuji, he remained in Japan for a while until he made his way to Rev Pro, and then later he went to Mexico, and then we know where they're at. These 3 men were now been looked at as the new Musketeers for the Rira 3 Musketeers. Those who don't know, there's a certain type of generational thing that happens when it comes to pro wrestling in New Japan. Like, there's the Musketeers. The last generation before these guys, it was Shinsuke Nakamura, Hiroshi Tanahashi, and Katsuyori Shibata. And the other one was back in the 80s, which was, of course, or 90s, I don't know which one was it. But anyway, it had Keiji Muto, Matsuhiro Chono, and I forgot who was the other person. Now, however, Yota Tsuji spoke about this to Tokyo Sports, talking himself that he feels a little discomfort that he's been lumped into that category with Umino and Narita. So he feels like he doesn't want to be part of that with them. I mean, look, these 3 men are exactly different from each other. So Tsuji, he feels like, give it to Khan, but he was not part of that generation. I mean, he's not part of that same class that these 3 were in. I mean, those are saying that Yuya Uemura should step in, but he's currently on excursion. We don't know when he'll be back, but we'll see what happens. I'm sure that many fans will probably feel like, oh, great, So we'll find out. Anyway, our next update. This was a very interesting one. The House of Glory for their upcoming event on the 18th of August, High Intensity. There will be a no holds barred match between the Mad King, Eddie Kingston, and of course the root of all evil, aka the biggest slime ball on the planet, Charles Mason. So we're gonna be seeing what happened. Now, interesting developments had took place in Twitter. Yuka Sakazaki, as you know, has been frustrated because of the injury she obtained. She is not medically cleared to wrestle, but however, she found some cheering up from fans. As you guys know, AEW released a Fight Forever game, and Yuka Sakazaki talked about how many fans are playing her character online, and she feels so much better. I think many fans are trying to cheer her up, even though they're like, "This, we're playing you when you're wrestling." So I thought it was pretty great, and she thanks the fans for cheering her up, and I think that's a great thing for them. Now, our final update. This is a very sad thing. Kind of forgot I wanted to do this in the beginning of the episode, but I get to do that here. You may have heard the sad news for those who grew up watching the WWF during the Attitude Era. Droz has passed away. Those who are unfamiliarized with Droz, Droz was a former NFL player, but I normally remembered him when he was like a somewhat of a third man for the legendary Legion of Doom or the Road Warriors. There was, if you guys ever seen like a documentary about them, Droz was like the third official man that actually joined the group. People thought it was a good idea, but things have gone south because of that. Droz, we haven't seen him since then, but in recent years, Droz ended up being paralyzed. Cannot remember what was the specific reasons, but he ended up confined in a wheelchair. Since then, he's been like that. But hearing the news that he passed away really saddened me because I was a big fan of the Legion of Doom growing up, and you can say that he's like an official member of that group, but it's sad that another member of that group is gone, that I grew up watching. So sad. So right now, our thoughts and prayers goes to Droz and his friends and family. Thank you, Droz, for the great memories you brought to me as a child, and I will always remember those. You will be missed, but not forgotten. So rest in peace, Droz. Well, I hope everybody enjoys this episode, alright? So as you know, the weekend is about to be so chaotic, so we're going to be taking a quote from the movie Gone in 60 Seconds. We're about to put our nuts in one basket. So, as you know, we continue with more of the Down Under tour by Impact Wrestling. We have the latest Choco Pro show that just came out, and of course the latest GLEAT show version 6, which is their 2nd year anniversary. And then finally we have AEW Collision. Now I know many people are saying there's been some bad reviews over that, but we'll see how this turns out. So I think that's pretty much it right now, what we have for the entirety of this episode. Until then, I will see you guys in the next DWZ time. Same DWZ channel. I must bid all of you adieu. So, goodbye. And have a nice day.